Notice to everyone, this meeting, I've just started the meeting recording. So this meeting will be recorded and for the rest of the time. So I'll now turn it over to Colleen, sort of our moderator, who will go over some ground rules and meeting technology, et cetera.
Great, thanks, Diana. I'm Colleen McHugh. I'm a planner at the Water Institute of the Gulf. I know a lot of folks on the call were able to join us for one or both of the first two workshops. And so thank you all for joining us again today. I just want to go over a few ground rules and tech check. Would ask that everyone take a moment right now to make sure that you're muted, and we're going to ask that folks in the audience sort of stay on mute during the course of the presentations. Please use the Zoom chat window to ask any questions that you might have, either of the panelists or of the organizers as well. I think Diana already went over if anyone's on the phone. Of course, there will be sort of slides to this presentation, so hope that folks are able to join us online. But this meeting will also be recorded, as will the subsequent meetings for this third workshop. So if there's any times that you can't join us in person, we will be recording and posting those on YouTube, and we'll share that on the Water Institute's website. So again, as Diana explained, this third workshop we're splitting into 3 days, in part so we can all combat the Zoom fatigue to some degree that I know we all must be feeling at this point. So wanted to give a little bit more breathing room between each of the presentations. So this afternoon we'll hear from Dr. Frank Tsai. On Thursday we'll hear from Dr. Julie Brunier, and on Friday from Dr. Simone Fiaschi. So we'll, following each of the presentations, so following the presentation today, our 3 panel members will have time to ask questions of the presenter. And I will help to facilitate that in the virtual setting that we are in today. And then we'll also reserve time at the end for the panelists to answer questions from the audience. And again, please use the chat box function to ask any questions of the presenter that you have. And just a note, professional development hours are tentatively available for this workshop for professional geologists and engineers. You can see some information about that here. Contact Diana at her email address down below, or info@waterinstitute.org for any of the materials needed for that. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Frank Tsai. He is the Chevron Professor of Engineering and the Director of the Louisiana Water Resources Research Institute at LSU. Dr. Tsai's research interests include coastal subsurface flow and hydrogeology, geological architecture modeling, and water resources system and management. He is here today to talk about his recent work funded by the Louisiana Center of Excellence on coastal land building and compactional subsidence using soil stratigraphy analysis and subsidence modeling. The title of his presentation is Understanding Dynamics of Groundwater Flows in the Mississippi River Delta, Implications for River Deltaic Hydrogeology. So with that, I'll turn over the speaker functions and stop sharing my screen so that Dr. Tsai can share his screen, and let you take it from here.
So Colleen, so now I can share my screen. All right. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's my honor to be the first speaker now for this third workshop for this Neotectonics workshop. And like Colleen said, my name is Frank Tsai, and I'm director for Louisiana Water Resources Research Institute, and also a professor in the Civil and Environmental Engineering department. So as you know that I'm an engineer, I'm not a geologist. So I know, this panel are all geologists, and the audience probably majority is are geologists or geoscientists. So I'm hoping that I can provide some study we done for the modeling for the Mississippi River Delta, and hopefully you will find out something interesting, from the engineering point of view. And I also want to thank Dr. Brendan Eels for his invitation to give me the opportunity to present our work on a project we received from the Restore Act Centers of Excellence for Louisiana from the Water Institute of the Gulf. This project started from 2017 and 2019. It just finished December 2019. And I also want to thank for Diana for arrangement for this talk. So we received a funding from LA-COE looking into the topic for delta geology and delta building and the subsidence. I'm personally a groundwater person, or even though I in the engineering department that I work on groundwater is my interest topic research area. So the project goal is to really look into the coastal land building and the compaction or subsidence of the Mississippi River Delta through two parts. One is the soil stratigraphy construction or modeling, and the second is groundwater flow modeling. Then our three objectives first is to develop a three-dimensional soil stratigraphy for the MRD. And second, to analyze the spatial pattern of the stratigraphy in the MRD, and to look into the possible seepage pathway that might be able to account for surface water, groundwater interaction. And third, we really build a groundwater model and really to quantify surface water, groundwater interaction, and then to imply ground heave, subsidence, and the erosion. Okay. And we receive a small amount of money from the COA to support graduate students, as you can see in the right corner, Dr. Andy, and this project results in 3 publications. This talk we are looking to the last 2 publications we published in 2012. The first publication is published in Hydrogeology Journal, 3-dimensional stratigraphy model for Mississippi River Delta, USA, implication for river deltaic hydrogeology. The second, looking into the groundwater modeling results published in the Journal of Hydrology. And this is also very important to the CPRA program implications. And so this is the list of the project results for the CPRA, from planning, feasibility, engineering design, all the way to the communication. And you can look into the summary of our project. If you look at planning, we develop a 3-dimensional stratigraphy for MRD, and also the groundwater model for MRD. And for feasibility, you can look into the first bullet point. We are able to categorize sediment distribution for the upper 50 of the MRD. Why we look into the upper 50 meters? Because that is a boundary between the Holocene sediment and the Pleistocene sediment. That's why we focus on the upper 50. And also you can look into the other bullet point for different categories over here. And the communication part, I like to look into, try to raise the awareness of a potential hydrogeohazards in MRD, because this is very important for CPRA when they implement their project for the coastal protection and the restoration. This MRD modeling is a part of a Louisiana groundwater modeling efforts I'm pushing through. So you can see from the figure in the left, in the past years, we has been collect a huge amount of well logs within Louisiana and within Mississippi State in order to address multiple groundwater related issues, looking at the soil water intrusion, the coastal aquifers, and maybe in the inland. And you can see the distribution of those well logs. Now, those are including the electrical logs, geotechnical borings, and the geologic logs. They are probably not many along the Louisiana coastal lines. So that will be the potential, or maybe the future work to have more data there. And also, in order to build a groundwater model in general, the figure at the right. Those data we collect, we put into the two parts. One is a Louisiana well log portal, and specific for this project, we have boring data along the Mississippi River, and we put into the quasi hydroshare, this website that if you want to download, you can download this boring data. And those boring data come from different sources. They're from the USDA, NRCS for soil cover, and also from Louisiana Department of Natural Resources, and the USGS, USACE, and the Louisiana Geological Survey, and also CPRA's LASAR data set. Sometimes we receive boring data from the private sectors. So what we are looking into in this project is really focused on the groundwater modeling in Mississippi River Delta in this area. The reason we look into this broad groundwater modeling is that we are able to use USGS MODFLOW-6. Under MODFLOW-6, we specifically use the code MODFLOW-USG. I will talk about MODFLOW-USG when we talking about the MRD groundwater modeling part. So the MODFLOW-6 allows us to look into groundwater modeling under different regions. So in this case, we divide the entire groundwater region in Louisiana into the 9 regions, and we will really focus on the region 8, which is this talk over here. So once we can build the groundwater model for each region, we will be able to combine all the region all together, really look into the groundwater system as a whole, not in pieces. So that's the goal. We gradually expand our groundwater model from inland, from coastal, gradually, then link them together. Hopefully in the future, we will be able to use USGS MODFLOW-6 to expand to the coastal lines, to the Texas, to the left or to the right, to the Mississippi. We will be able to really look into the coastal lowlands aquifer system, which will be really interesting relating to the coastal activities. So the outline for this talk is first look into the MRDP, Mississippi River Delta Plain, and look into the interest, the motivation is looking into the land loss and what approach we can target or maybe better understand the groundwater model relating to the land loss in coastal Louisiana. Then we look into the MRD stratigraphy modeling, look into the results we have, the implication, and some highlights. Then we continue the stratigraphy modeling, then we really build a groundwater model, then look into the results and the implication and the highlights. Then we have future work of 2, seawater intrusion and the land subsidence. As you can see that you will see in this talk, we are not really model seawater intrusion. The groundwater model we are using we are not consider density effect, and we hope to consider density effect. Also, we did not really model land subsidence. We want to do it, but we don't. We can. Well, this work is basically looking to the stratigraphy and groundwater model and have implication to land subsidence. But hopefully, in the future, we will be able to really model land subsidence based on groundwater model we have. So this is the. Let's see, how do I? Okay, this is the Mississippi River Delta Plain, MRD. As many of you already know that this is the Mississippi River is the driving force for this land creation for the southeastern Louisiana or for Mississippi River Delta Plain. And we are looking into the number 5 of here, which is a Plaquemine-Bellis complex in these areas. And this area is very complicated because if you look into the concept model for the river deltaic depositional environment, you will see, you will see some distributary bays and channels, natural levees. Sometimes you have crevasse sprays. These are land surface expression. For the subsurface, you will see the data plane. You will see some mouse bars, or maybe some for delta clay and silt, something like that. So it's very complicated. Okay, so we are looking into the modeling in MRD this area. Why MRDP is very important? Because MRDP in this area has lots of economic implications, including the ports, the transportation along the rivers, and the residential ecosystem, and also seafood also is very important. So that's why study MRDP is very important for Louisiana because of lots of economic impacts. Land loss. Okay, this map shows the land loss change in coastal Louisiana from 1932 to 2016. As you can see that the land loss during this period is almost more than 4,800 kilometers. Okay, then the hourly land loss is about the football field. And this land loss account for 90% of a total coastal marsh loss in the continental US. So it's a pretty significant. And I remember the last year there's a symposium called the Louisiana Coastal Geology Symposium at the LGS, looking into the subsidence rate in the MRD, and the keynote speaker is Chris McLendon, who is a chair of the New Orleans Geological Society, and he estimated about the 4.7 to 4.1 millimeters per year land loss subsidence rate in the MRD. Also, Louisiana CPRA has lots of projects in order to combat this land loss in these areas. As you can see, the channel diversions, marshland creations, and it's wildlife restorations and bank stabilization, something more than, and of course there are more projects than those 4 photos here. The subsidence is very important to coastal Louisiana, also to this. That's why we have the workshop over here. As for the subsidence, is the process of gradual settling or sudden sink of land surface due to subsurface movement of earth materials. And there's a very good papers published by Brandon back to 2009 to categorize what causes the subsidence, including tectonics. In terms of Louisiana, will be 14, and Holocene sediment compactions, sediment loading, glacier isostatic adjustment, which we don't have here because now this is a deep south, and the anthropogenic fluid withdrawal, referring to the groundwater pumping and the oil and gas withdrawal, and the surface water drainage and the management, which much closer to the CPRA's restoration projects. To understand the subsidence in the past decades, we have lots of modeling. They are really great. You can see there's a sediment diversion modeling, storm surge model, sea level rise model, river hydrodynamic models. We also have a LSU river Center for River Study, a physical model really looking into what's going on for the MRDP and MRD. But what is missing over here? Among these models, no one really looking into the groundwater flow and how the groundwater might impact the land building in this area. So let's motivate our research to really look into the groundwater. So we always ask why not model groundwater flow in the MRD in the last several decades. As you can see the picture over here at the left, under the groundwater system create a passage through the coarse grains between the river and the interdisciplinary bays. And those connections, the river water, the tide, the bay water can flow into the subsurface and creating a lot of geohazard conditions. For example, you can see the high water level next to the levee might create a levee under seepage issues, and we have sand boil issues, and we have these relief wells try to relieve pressures under the levee, and also Katrina levee breach, many levee breach related to the underground hyper water pressure. So we feel that the study groundwater is really important for MRD. All right, so we posted some questions along the way we study and we do the research. We want to know how are sand, sealed, clay, organic sediments distributed in the upper 50 meter of MRD in the Holocene years. How to understand the spatial temporal dynamics of groundwater in the MRD, and how strong and where now we can know we do the groundwater and surface water interaction in the MRD, and how does the groundwater systems respond to flood, to storm, and to hurricane events, and what roles do the stratigraphy and groundwater play in the coastal sustainability. Okay, that's what hopefully we can address now when we have these two models. So our approach is first is really collect and the data assimilation for emerging land water system data set. We collect the data sometimes from the LSU coastal CSI and geotechnical borings from CPRA, from the USACE. And sometimes we have a cone penetrometer test, CPT, from industries. And in this case, we mainly use the geotechnical boring to understand the MRD. Once we know the data, okay, so also we have a topographic data from NOAA, and also the hydrogeological data. Hydrological data, like river, like a tide stage from USACE, from CPRA, from USGS. So we model stratigraphy based on two methods. One is called geostatistics. Another one is called a multi-indicator method. So this talk, you will see we use a multi-indicator method to get the distribution of different sediment types in the MRD. Then we can produce a three-dimensional stratigraphy model. Then we move on to build a groundwater model based on the stratigraphy model. And we add the river, the tidal stages data as a boundary, as a forcing to the model. And we use the USGS MODFLOW-USG. USG represents unstructured grid for the groundwater modeling. And we build the three-dimensional groundwater model. So that's the procedure we have. So we look into two topics today. One is the MRD stratigraphy model. Another one is a MRD groundwater flow model. And we really look into simulation results in MRD over here. So MRD stratigraphy modeling, the talk basically based on the published papers in the Hydrogeology journal. We post the three questions we want to answer. First is how to efficiently regionalize categorical sediment types data. We have sand, clay, silt, and how do we get the distribution of those sediment types? Then what are those distributions for different sediment in the upper 50 MRD? And what's the implication we can have for the real deltaic subsidence and the sediment erosion based on stratigraphy model results? So this slide shows the data collection that we look into the yellow boundary, our model boundary. And this boundary including two subdeltas. One subdelta is called fragment subdeltas. The other delta is called buried subdeltas over here. And this model, covers the longitudinal distance probably around 100 kilometers. Transverse, the width of the model probably around 20 kilometers. So totally area probably around 2,000 kilometers square. And we look into the first figure along the MRD. Those yellow dots are the geotechnical boring data we collect from USACE. Sometimes some are from the LaSalle data. Totally, we have 619 borings. And you can see that 619 borings are not uniformly distributed. Somewhere you have a cluster of data, somewhere you don't have any data. So that created really lots of uncertainties of the stratigraphy model when we try to build, because the data are not evenly distributed. That's the potential issue when we create this model. The second figure over here shows the topography, the land surface. The land surface, basically, you can see lots of yellow and the green colors represents maybe around 1 meter, around 1 meter, 2 meters above land surface. And you can see this is the middle is the Mississippi River. At the right is Brenton Sound, which you can see a very deep topography, maybe deep, maybe 10 meters below sea level. And at the left, you have this is Barataria Bay, which you also have some very deep topography, less than 10 meters. Then the bathymetry along the Mississippi River is even deeper. As you can see that the bathymetry in the river can as deep as 60 meters somewhere. And also wide arrows represents bathymetry less deep than 30 meters, several area. Those deep cut Mississippi River trunk potentially will create a hydraulic connections between the aquifers in these areas and the Mississippi River. The fourth figure here represents the land loss, giving us a perspective that's where land loss occurred in the past. As you can see, we have a lot of red colors at the right, at the left represents the early loss, and we have orange and blue color in the upper right. Sorry, upper right, and this represents the current land loss over here. All right, so based on the 619 boring data we analyzed, we find out 75% of those sediments are the fine sediments, fine grains. As you can see, close to more than 47% are fat clay, represented by the CH, clay with high plasticity. And we also have a great amount of lean clay, represented by CL. The coarse grains, probably around 25% from the boring data we have here. The peat is really small, and organic clay are very small amount in this area. So we have different categories for those USGS soil classifications. So our next job is really construct a stratigraphy based on those sediment types. So the method that we use is called MINN, multiple indicator natural neighbor interpolation method. There's an interpolation method to interpolate those categorical data that I try not to go into more details about what is the natural neighbor interpolation method, but there's a method. But you can see that once we have some categorical data based on mononomial tessellation, we will be able to construct the sediment types three-dimensionally for the MRD. So this is the results. As you can see on the figure at the left is the surface distribution of sediment. As you can, we use red, yellow, and pink. The light color represents the coarse sand. We have a green for silt. We have a blue and gray for clay, and organics for peat. We have much darker color over here. So in the surface, you can see we have more coarse sand represents at the surface near the river mouth, and we have lots of coarse sand along the Mississippi River trunk. Majority of the area you can see will be clays. If you look into the depths, different elevations, and look in the percentage of these four different sediment, you'll find out -10 meters below sea level, we have rich organics, also very rich in clays. The sand and the silt are not many. But interestingly, we find out between the -10 and -35 meters, we have a huge amount of sand over here, coarse grains. That will be influenced greatly by the river, also by the groundwater flows. And after the -35 meters, we see the huge amount of clay here. So you can see the sequence of clay, sand, and clay, kind of in sequence in this area. This is the spatial distribution at the different depth, -3 meters, -12 meters, -21 meters, all the way down to -40 meters. So you can see the distribution of these four sediments are quite different. As you can see, the sand within the -12 meters, you can see a lot of sand in the center and in the north, and to the right side of the river. You can hear and you can see the red here. However, sand start to disappear toward to the river mouth. And you also see a very good amount of organic on the shallow areas. -3, you can see organic matter over here and over here, but in the deep areas, deep depth, we really don't see the organic matters. And you look into different profile from A, B, C to H, you can see the lateral distribution of sediment. And this study more focused on the yellow and the red, which represents the coarse sand. As you can see, for the north areas, the A cross section, BB cross section, we have a huge aquifers over here that really cut through by the Mississippi River. So Mississippi River really can transmit the water. You can see the strong interaction between Mississippi River and the groundwater. Also in the EE cross sections around the EE cross section around at the middle of the model, which is the E prime here is Brenton Sound. So you can see the yellow part in the shallow sand here. Let's really create a passage to link the river water from the Mississippi River through the shallow sand into the Brenton Sound. So there's a passage really in the shallow water. Then we look into the cross section, the distribution of different sediment distribution over here. You can see in the central and the north areas, we have coarse grains. We have a good percentage of coarse grain. However, when we toward to the river mouth, the coarseness start to disappearing. So we have several implications based on the stratigraphy study. The first is that we really see the river bay connection with the groundwater through the coarse grain sediment. And we understand there are lots of studies to study the submerged groundwater discharge and the submerged groundwater recharge, HGD and the HGR, and those now the results we have really can identify the location on for these two measurements. And we find out a groundwater can connect to estuary at the shallow sands less than -10 meters and above. And groundwater can connect to the river channels at the deep sand between the -10 meter to -35 meters. And we also find out because there's less sand in the river mouth, so we will see the less connections between groundwater and surface water. And we point out that we have a large exposed sand at the Brenton Sound based on our modeling results, and this indicates good connection between Mississippi River and the Brenton Sound. Subsidence implication, we found out because we have a much finer grains on the top 10 meters, clay and organic sediment rich, so it's likely to have a consolidation. However, for the deep sand, because of pore water pressure change by the river, it's likely to have this elastic compaction and inspection from the deep sand. And this also has an impact on the vegetation and results in wetland deterioration and the elevation losses because of consolidation and compaction. And sediment erosion also has implication because of high pore water pressure come from the river during the flood or during the hurricane. And this high pore water pressure can occur in the and in the land surface through these shallow pathways that upward seepage will reduce effective stress of sediment and will stabilize the sediment because of high pore water pressure. There's also a hydrogeological modification implication. Dredging is a big issue right over here because the dredging could create artificial groundwater and surface water connection that might be able to deliver undesired high pore water pressure to some place where we don't want. So this study highlights the stratigraphy for the upper 50 meters of MRD. And we will be able to use geotechnical boring really to visual as a data to categorize the sediment distributions. And the indicator method, interpolation method, we found is a robust approach for this sediment type regionalization purpose. Sand are found to be abundant between 10 meters and negative 35 meters, and are thinning toward to the downstream, to the river mouth. And exposed sand to the river and the bay imply extensive surface water and groundwater interaction. Diana, if I speak over 14 minutes, please, 35 minutes, please give me a sign that I can control the time of my presentation. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, you're okay.
I'm okay now? Okay, good. All right, so once we have a stratigraphy, we start to look into the groundwater modeling to see groundwater dynamics in the MRD. This is based on the paper in the Journal of Hydrology. The research question is that we want to try to understand the spatial temporal dynamics of the groundwater in the MRD, and look into how strong and where the groundwater system interact with waters in the Mississippi River and the surrounding bays, and look into the groundwater system response to the severe hydrological events like flood, tropical storms, and hurricanes. So we start to to do the groundwater model. We use the USGS MODFLOW-USG. It is an unstructured grid. If you are not working on the groundwater area, probably you don't know this MODFLOW model. So I just give a brief introduction about what is MODFLOW-USG. MODFLOW-USG is based on the control volume finite difference method. So it's a finite difference method. The language, the numeric code is a 4-chain. It's unstructured grid. You can build any kinds of grid you want. You can have rectangular grid, quadrilateral grid, triangular grid, Voronoi grid, irregular polygons. You also can refine grids based on quadtree approach. This MODFLOW basically solves this parabolic partial differential equation. We call it groundwater flow equation. H represents groundwater head, represents groundwater energy. SS represents sediment specific storage, which directly linked to the subsidence rate if you want to simulate that. KX, KY, Y, KZZ represents an isotropic hydraulic conductivity. And W here is a big part. It represents the forcing terms. Those forcing terms can be from the boundary, can be from the vegetation, evapotranspiration, can from the rainfall, sufficient recharge. If we are pumping, we can represent the pumping wells. If we have artificial drains, we can represent the drains. We have river, stream, lake. Sometimes we have underground conduit. This conduit may be interactive with the groundwater system. So we can have this one in the W. And it also can represent fault, represents a horizontal barrier, basically from the fault. And USG also can simulate subsidence, which we did not do for this work. To do this modeling, so we can have this very complicated river deltaic environment, we can simplify it into this kind of box over here. And we look into the precipitation evaporation from the top, and look into the river and the bay at the side. And we also have some lateral flow through the other model boundaries. So what we need, which is more important to throw into the model, is the model parameters, which is the sediment properties, hydraulic conductivity, specific storage, and specific yield. If we know these three guys, we put and the other forcing terms, so we can simulate well the model, the groundwater model. All right, so this is the model set up. So we have these study areas, and we have a boring 16 and 19. And we have a river gauges. We have 6 river gauges along the Mississippi River. And we have tide gauges from Crane, 80, and the 4 tide gauges from NOAA, and the 2 tide gauges from USGS to represent the tide effect around the model boundaries. And we simulate 2012 years, which we have a Hurricane Isaac to the left of our model domain. So our model setup is that we have 100 kilometer long and 200 kilometer wide. Our simulation, our cell size is 200 meters. We have 25 model layers. In total, we have 1.12 million cells to simulate. Our simulation time is 1 year, from November 2011 to October 2012. And we do daily simulation. And this is the hydrological data and the hydrological events. The first figure is a river stage from 6 river stations. As you can see, we can identify 3 floods events in the springtime. And in the late June, we have the tropical storm Debbie over here. And the Hurricane Isaac in August, end of August, beginning of September, we have a Hurricane Isaac that raised the river stage. And this is the tide data we have. And so you can see that the flood events, 3 flood events confined by the levees will not impact the tide levels. However, when we have tropical storm and we have a Hurricane Isaac, these 2 hydrological events does impact river stages, also impact tide stages. And we also look into the model inundation. This is a weight percentage from around 60% maximum to like around 90%. So during the normal hydrological event, the more than 60% of surface cells covered by water. However, for a tropical storm and the hurricane, we have more than 85% of area covered by water. So that represents a weight percentage. We put all those information as a forcing terms into the groundwater model. And this is the stratigraphy we saw from the previous studies. And this is the boundary conditions we set up. We set up river boundary along the red areas and the top view. And in the side view for different cross section, AA to EE, with side, we have these lateral boundary conditions on the top. We have these tide boundary conditions based on tidal data. Then, unfortunately, really unfortunately to me is that in this area, we do not have groundwater level. We cannot find any single groundwater data in this area. from the public domain. We check with the USGS many times and look into their website. We do not have groundwater data. And we need to estimate hydraulic conductivity and the other two parameters for this soil classifications. Since we don't have data, so what we do is to do the uncertainty analysis. We look into the huge range of data, huge range of values for different parameters, and we throw all those, based on Monte Carlo simulation, we throw those values into the model and create an ensemble mean and also the variance based on the model output. And we look into the sensitivity analysis based on the composite scale of the sensitivity to identify which parameters are sensitive, which parameters are not sensitive. And after that, we will be able to simulate the groundwater head over here. So this just show you a small movie that there's a one model layer is 19 meters below NAVD 88, and you can look into the simulation results that we simulate up to May to show you, and you can start to show a groundwater surface water groundwater interaction, because we have 3 floods over here from that create a hyper water pressure into the aquifer system. And again, we have a good sand in the middle and in the upper part of the model, and we have less sand in the bottom. And we also have a very strong interactions in the Brenton Sound to the river, is because we have exposed sand in this area. So that's the simulation results. Then we look into the water budget, how much groundwater in, how much groundwater out, and how much river flow into the groundwater, how much river, and something like that. So we will have a river boundary. We can look into the discharge, recharge through the river boundary, and through the tide boundary, and through the lateral boundary. The conclusion over here is looking to the lateral boundaries here. We do find out there are river water really go into the groundwater and dissipated to the lateral boundaries. So we have a large amount of lateral outflow rate through the lateral boundary. And we have a river boundary, the flow in and out, it depends on local hydraulic gradient between the groundwater level and the river level. We do have a huge spike when we have hurricane storms. So when we have a hurricane comes in, hurricane will bring, will raise river stage immediately, and in a very short of time, within a day. Then you can see the huge spike over here. Then when hurricane left, and the groundwater, the river stage drop, and the groundwater start to discharge immediately. So we see this quick response at the river and at the tide boundaries. We also can look into the storage of groundwater change through different hydrological events based on the model. Then these 4 figures shows we have a groundwater distribution. We start from the November 1st, which is a low tide, low river stage, and these are the pre-flood conditions. And then we have, in February, we have a flood condition, and we have started to have high river water, which create a poor water pressure in the sand. Then we have a storm debut in June. This is distribution. And in the hurricane season, August 29th, and during the peak, you can see lots of a green area here represents a high tidal water here inundate the surface. And we also have a strong poor water pressure into the aquifer. And we start to look into the seepage-induced factor of safety because this is more important factors to the engineering purpose. Understand the fact safety can be compromised or not. So we look into a peak flood stage, which is February 15, 2012, and the peak hurricane stage at end of August. And looking into the probability of factor safety less than 1.5. So red area 1%, 1 here, red area represent 100% that factor safety is less than 1.5. 0.1 over here represents less than 10% chance factor safety less than 1.5. So we look into along the Mississippi River, and we have several wind levees around the Mississippi River, and we look into 3 areas. We find out during the peak flood discharge, we have huge areas within the wind levee has high chance factor safety less than 1.5, which is not a good thing because of hyper water pressure. So even though it's not flooded, protected by the wind levee, under the ground, you have a huge high water pressure. And we also have a high water pressure in the areas where you do not have a wind levees. If you compare to the peak hurricane stage, which is in a very short period of time, you get a very high river stage. As you can see, also impact the area within the levee, within the wind levee, high chance of factor safety less than 1.5, and you have a relatively small area outside the wind levee. When flood disappears or when the hurricane disappears, river stage drop. So we're looking into the impact in the groundwater. So you can see that 15 days after the flood peak low stage, we still have a residual hyper water pressure inside the aquifers. As you can see for the B2 here, in this area, even though for low river stage, you still see the hyper water pressure inside the wind levee and also the hyper water pressure outside wind levee. The case for the hurricanes is even worse. You can see that 3 days after the hurricane peak, we have a hyper water pressure inside the wind levee, and we have created additional, if you compare to previous and before, during the peak, after the hurricane, you can see those residual hyper water pressure inside the aquifer create more areas with high chance of factor safety less than 1.5, which is not a good thing. So the conclusion, the implication over here is that the MRD can implicate, the groundwater model can really look into the infrastructure safeties because of the hyper water pressure. And also can look into the salinization and the desalinization, because in this area, we understand we have, even though we don't simulate solar water intrusion, but we know the solar water will come from the Bay Area into the aquifer, or from river into the aquifer, or desalinization in the reverse way. And that will impact the vegetation and impact the wetlands. And also the upward seepage, from what we see from the groundwater modeling, it really can reduce the effective stress of sediment and will destabilize sediment. And also we find out it's very interesting, which called a ground expansion and the subsidence. Looking into the land vertical movement, how this relating to the groundwater. So you look into these pictures. This study is the seasonal change of March elevation. This is done by CPRA in the Cream Station and the Barataria Bay. You can see this land elevation up and down seasonally, but eventually the land is increased, elevation is increased. So why is up and down in the measurement? It really reflects to the surface water, groundwater interaction. You can look into these cross sections, look into, even though we know the top first 10 meters, we have a consolidation from the fine grains. However, the aquifers between the -10 meter and -35 meters, we have this aquifer expansion and the compaction through the river, seasonal river stage change by the hydrological events. That's why we would have this kind of up and down vertical movement. And it will be very interesting to study groundwater subsidence modeling to look into the feature of this. So the highlights of this study is that, yes, we find out that the Mississippi, the MRD has a very complicated hydrological settings. We find out groundwater flow rate is 3 to 4 orders smaller than the Mississippi River discharge rate. So not, if you compare to the river flow, not many groundwater really flow in and out of the river. However, the key is not the river flow rate, it's the hypo water pressure. This hypo water pressure represents by the surface water groundwater inductions during the severe hydrological events. And we find out a sharp groundwater recharge to discharge reverse occur right after hurricane pass. So you'll see this immediate response. And the hypo water pressure is really an issue, okay, during and after hurricane, and may destabilize the surface sufficient sediment. So the future work from this study is we are really looking into future that we really we can simulate the saltwater intrusion, understand the fluid density impact to the groundwater flow, and also then subsidence using the MODFLOW 6. Hopefully in the future can expand to the entire Mississippi Delta Plain or Chenier Plain or entire Gulf of Mexico. That will be the very long-term groundwater work in the future. And this is the last slide. And again, this project is funded by the Restore Act through CPRA and the Water Institute of the Gulf. Thank you very much. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Tsai. So we're now going to kind of turn it over to our panelists to ask follow-up questions, provide any comments. I think to maybe give this a little bit of structure, panelists, I might just call on you sort of in order to provide initial comments or ask initial questions, and then maybe we can open it up to a dialogue among the three of you. So maybe Liz, we can start with you.
Sure, sounds good. Hi everyone, thanks Frank, that was really cool to see, and I really appreciated you sharing it with us. I guess my first question, and maybe it's my most burning question, is when you constructed your subsurface maps or volumes really, so it looked like a lot of the borings were right along the levee and right along the river, and there wasn't a lot of data available sort of out in the bays or away from the river. I guess just a couple of questions about that is, one, is that pretty typical of the data availability, or is there more data available away from the rivers? And then two, how you handled that, or what your sense of the uncertainty with extrapolating away from that kind of levee area out into the bay.
Yes, Liz, thank you very much. Yes, those are very, very good questions. And when we submitted the papers, we also received those similar questions, and it's legitimate questions. Those boring data we receive is from LaSalle and from USGS. And boring data are expensive. All right, so they have a boring data basically based on their project. And their project on the levee or maybe or channel diversion, something like that. It's very specific. It will be the site specific or project specific. They are not drill holes based on the research purpose. It's based on project purpose. That's why you can see a majority of the borehole along the Mississippi main channel, because that's a project about, there's a levee about. and also lots of boreholes very near the river mouth, the head of passes, because there are several projects over there, which we cannot control. That's the only data we have. And we are hoping if for the research purpose, they will be willing to drill, or some maybe academic institutions will be willing to drill more holes away from the main channel. That would be great. That will reflect to the uncertainty in the model, the stratigraphy modeling results, as well as the interpretations. There's a way really look into the geological uncertainty based on the boring data and based on the interpolation of boring data. That's why we look into geostatistics, because geostatistics give you the statistical uncertainty of the results. It can be done. We did not do that. It can be done. And hopefully that will be able to address the potential uncertainty in the structures.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about other constraints out there? So if there's not boring data, what about electrical logs or any other, is there other data available that to help constrain what the subsurface is out in other areas?
Yeah, that's also, okay. They are looking at well logs, electrical logs, geologs log is the best, because geologs give you, geotechnical log boring give you the best description of sediment, very detailed based on the USGS soil classification.
Yeah, so real good details there.
Real good details, yeah. and our model rely on the good details. In that area, we did not see the electrical logs. Electrical log you can identify based on maybe corrosive phases and fine phases. This is basically in the inland areas, or maybe in much deeper when they do the oil and gas drilling. Okay, they have a much deeper electrical logs. But in the shallows and in the shallow area, usually you don't have borehole electrical logs. You might have sufficient ERT, sufficient electrical, received tomography. We don't have that data, so we don't know. So in these very specific coastal zones, the well logs data we have, we can find basically the boring data.
Yeah. And then, so those are just some big gaps sitting out there, I guess, right? For out away from the channels, yeah.
Right. Those big gaps, and I know that in the Tulane they have a group, has in the sampling data and boring data,
targeted efforts to
efforts. Yes. Those we, because of restrictions, so those we did not consider.
Yeah.
But once we can consider, we can really reshape our model structures.
Yeah. That's and then I guess another question I had is sort of when you're thinking about that stratigraphic model that you build, what was sort of the typical grid size or depth size for, how I mean, I didn't know if I didn't quite catch if it was fully gridded, that model, or if it was more of a mesh. But I guess for that stratigraphic model, how far were you averaging?
Okay, the grid size, we're looking at grid, the cell size is 200 meter by 200 meter.
Okay.
In the bird view is a square, 200 meter by 200 meter. However, this is a three-dimensional model. We have 25 layers across 50 meters.
And those are even thicknesses?
No, they are not even.
Okay.
They vary.
Okay.
It depends on the deposition of sediments.
Okay.
So the thickness of layers are different.
Okay.
At the different places. Yeah.
Cool. Good. Well, I think maybe I'll pass it along now, Colleen, and we can loop back if I have other questions. But thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Elise.
John?
Sorry about that, I had an unmute. Couple questions. One has to do with, you commented that the water intrusion, the impact of the water intrusion on the vegetation. And since the water intrusion is occurring generally at minus 10 meters, I guess my question is, what is the impact of the actual groundwater on vegetation. I can see where flooding could potentially impact vegetation, certainly during a tropical storm or hurricane, but I don't understand, I'm still vague on how the actual groundwater penetration is influencing vegetation.
This is a very good question. Okay, it is true that the surface water will greatly impact about bringing salinity into the vegetation, will directly impact. The groundwater, here we see that we do have a shallow aquifers, shallow coarse grains. We do have that, we do see that. And those will create, and we also have a silt on the surface. So that create a permeable or semi-permeable places for groundwater moving under the vegetation. And groundwater flow is very slow. It's much slower than surface water. So when we have this soil water intrusion, either from the river or from the bay, moving into the groundwater, once it gets into the groundwater, it will stay in the groundwater much longer time than surface water. So when you can imagine that you might have a salinity come from the bay into the subsurface, in the shallow subsurface, maybe a few inches of under the root zones. Then we have salinity over there. Well, this salinity probably not as much as a sea salinity, ocean salinity, but will be much higher than the fresh water. Then when the surface water retreat, you still have a salinity under the root zones. I feel that could create a secondary impact to the vegetation because there's a delayed or residual saline groundwater underneath the land surface. Yeah, I do not do the simulation. I don't know, but looking into the behavior of groundwater and the passage on land surface, near the land surface, that's kind of implication I have.
Another sort of quick question. I'm kind of curious again to come back to one of Liz's questions about these actual logs. Are these drillers' logs? Are these water well data that are actually coming from the drillers? I know in Texas we have hundreds of wells. We have this huge amount of data, but the quality of the data is often suspect depending on who actually did the describing.
Yes.
And so we've had very mixed results trying to use those data.
Yes.
Particularly for water well data where it was actually the drillers that did the describing. So can you give us a little bit more information about what actually, what that data, where that data comes from, who's doing the describing?
Okay. The data, we have 619 geotechnical boring data. So, which means that when they really get the soil sample and bring to the lab and do the experiment. Now, understand the grain size and also understand some LL, PI, LI indexes. So indexes for the engineering purpose. So those are not the drillers log. I understand drillers log, sometimes the drillers, when they drill, they write down what they see, right? And quickly, something like that. Those are, like you say, uncertain, and although provide some useful information, but uncertain and not precise. The the geotechnical logs we got from USACE, actually from New Orleans office, and from LaSalle data posted to the CPRA website. And those they already analyze and have the detailed soil classifications and the depth in their PDF files. That's the place we got. So I'm pretty confident. And those data are really precise. I would say not precise. I would say will be the best log data we have. And we did not use any geologist log or electrical log. We purely only use geotechnical logs for our study. Yeah.
one last question has to do with the porosity permeability of, you're looking at 50 meters here.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that even though you have sandy, you've got a fairly thick sand from about 10 meters to 30, 40 meters depth, which is a river channel, I assume. Mm-hmm. Do you see, is there data on the porosity and any kind of data in these logs that helps you get the porosity and permeability? I realize you have grain size, but I'm wondering if there's any other data that are available to actually look at permeability and porosity from these logs.
Yes, if we really go back to those reports, the PDF reports, and look into the lab reports, you will see much more information than just the soil classification. You will see a lot of details about the porosity and some indexes, like water contents, percentage, something like that.
Okay. So they do have water. Yeah, okay, water content.
Yeah, they have water contents. They do, but we did not collect those data. We only collect source classification data for the study purpose. But you are right. There are very detailed data in the geotechnical boring report.
And I realize those are data that are collected on one occasion. So that unless they're drilling the well during a storm or during a flood, they're not going to give you that set of conditions. But it seems like it would be useful to know at least sort of the background conditions for how porosity and permeability would vary as you go down through that 20 or 25 meters of sand. If it does vary, for example, there could be clay that's starting to, some of these sands may have a lot of clay matrix that's impacting the porosity and permeability. So it just seems to me that that information would be useful, even though it's collected on one occasion, as that well's being drilled.
Yeah.
That a compilation of that data might give you some information about the porosity permeability structure as you go down through that thick aquifer and how it might vary.
Yes, if you really really dig into the data, okay, geotechnical data, and really analyze, yes, I believe we will see the variation of porosity along the depths. I believe that. So the reason we did not look into that is because when we are doing the groundwater modeling, I show the groundwater model, the equation there. What he needs is permeability. You don't need to know the porosity. What you need to know is the permeability. And permeability is difficult to get because you need to do the extra lab work to get the permeability. Or yes, you will be able to use porosity to estimate permeability, based on grain size, some grain size measure. You can do that, but we did not. But I think it's good that you mentioned about the porosity, and we can go back to look into more detail about porosity and may be able to infer more reasonable permeabilities in the model. Yeah, that can be done, yes.
Okay, well, I'll pass the baton to Dave.
Okay, thanks, Frank. I won't ask as many questions about how you built the stratigraphic model, but I do have some questions about the groundwater model implication for understanding sort of the state of the deposit. And the first is you have these numerical results. Are there any wells out there that have continuous hydraulic head measurements so you can actually calibrate this or actually benchmark it, see how well you're doing? And if there aren't, why? I mean, clearly drilling those wells is as cheap as doing the modeling. It seems like there has to be some mix, right, of actually calibrating actually having calibration sites and the numerical model?
You are totally right. You know, when I start with this project, I start to realize, hey, we cannot get any groundwater hydraulic head data from this area. We search and search and search, we could not find.
Wow.
So that's the problem. So we love to have groundwater level.
Yeah.
Now then we can calibrate groundwater model. We know how to calibrate groundwater model based on the data.
Yeah.
We don't have.
Yeah,
And
so that's
a fact.
interesting because it seems to be, I mean, it's not just for this study, but the whole way along in thinking about what the land surface is doing, a whole set of wells that actually gave us hydraulic head across the delta with time would tell us a lot. It'd tell us about the flow, which would tell us about the porosity and permeability. It's a kind of data that actually isn't that expensive, and we don't have it for the state, it sounds.
We don't have it, and I hope the CPRA or maybe USGS, if they have a funding, now in the future, they would really spend some, like you said, they are not expensive, and they are shallow. And then the coastal zone, they are shallow, they are not expensive. They can install some pixometers, continue to measure groundwater model. However, I want to say is that when we do the searching about the data, we primarily look into the government data. Look into USGS, we look into USACE. But we understand that from the DNR, Louisiana Department of Natural Resources, from DNR well data, there are lots of, they call it pixometer wells in that region belong to the industries.
Interesting.
So I believe because there are lots of plants, industry along Mississippi River in that area, I believe industry are monitoring groundwater level for their plants or for their factories. I believe that because they show that in the DNR, but we don't have access to those private pixometer wells.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So let me ask you, and it'd be great to have that data to really understand what this material is like. A little bit more about your model. It's not a full hypereic model, right? You don't have both channel flow and subsurface flow. You're putting on a water surface that varies in time and space, right? And then the flow. Okay, so that's how it's working. Okay. We
do have a phreatic condition, which means that we do because when we simulate the groundwater model, there's another parameter we call the specific yield. That's why when the water table is below land surface or below clay, okay, inside the coarse grains, you do have this water table. Then it model that. The groundwater provides the information about where is the groundwater level inside, under the ground, inside. So they are phreatic, I mean, unconfined aquifer, let's say this way, unconfined condition. We do see that in our model.
Because it is interesting, you do predict some pretty high pore fluid pressures based on, at least I guess, based on your factor of safety values. And so when you hit it with these water surface elevations, or when you drive your groundwater model, are these like AdCirc data? Is this somehow integrated tide data plus storm data plus river data? I'm just trying to get a sense of how you put that data together.
Yes. Initially, we want to collaborate with other people who has predicted tide data in grid around our area. We could not at that moment in time. Okay, we could not. We cannot get the tide data. So what we do is we did by our own. We have this almost 50 tide gauges. The student did a work, not me. The student did a phenomenal work. He went back, went back to look into all those tide stage data and created interpolation. East side, west side, south side, all by himself. And those interpolation for the year 2012 and serve as a forcing boundaries for the groundwater model. So we do not use excerpt. We hope in the future can link it with the excerpt. That's a potential possibility. But for our model, we just do the interpolation by ourselves. Yeah.
The reason I was asking is that when you're down on the river, down near Venice or Hedda Passes, you know, the river stage doesn't actually vary much between high and low tide. I mean, between high and low discharge, and you're getting pretty profound differences as the floods go by. I mean, more than I would have expected. So I'm, yeah, I was surprised. Yeah.
For the flow near the river mouth?
Yeah, for the flow from actually almost in your whole reach, the dynamic range in water surface elevation between the big floods and the and low flow is pretty small, because you're well into the backwater there, right? And so it's it seems like you're getting a pretty big response in your groundwater system driven by what isn't that large a water surface elevation difference in the river. But that just surprised me. Yeah. So I
yeah, okay.
If you're telling me that's what it is, and then I'm going to have to rethink what these deposits are like. They're much more reactive than I would have guessed.
Okay, that's what we have on the model, because I don't know, that's what we have.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
One last question, just I'm in your, so this is about the deposits. About 50% from the borings was, labeled CH, which I guess is some sort of clayey something. Do you know how much variability is there in the properties of whatever that CH is? Do you happen to know, since it's such a big component of your whole model? Is it really tightly defined, or is it a grab bag of a bunch of, I just don't know. So I'm just asking.
Okay. Those soil classifications, like you mentioned over here, those OHCH, CL, those are based on the USGS soil classification. And they have a certain protocols for the experiment to define this. And you can see the first letter called C, which means clay. And the H represents, from the engineering property, the H represents, we call it fat clay, or call it high plasticity. And the CL over here has a different property in engineering. We call it CL called a lean clay, which is that you have a low plasticity. Those are defined through an experiment. Based on, I forgot, based on the liquid index or plasticity index, PL, and one, okay, that's not good. So those are for the engineering point of view. And for the engineering point of view, they have an impact when we do the, for the constructions, they are different. But if you ask me about hey, how about the difference, the permeability difference between the CH and the CL, something like that, and right.
I mean, the reason
I would say it's basically clay to me.
Yeah. The reason I was asking is that since you don't have you gave a wide range of properties for the different classifications. And I was trying to get a sense of how much of that wide range of material properties was you're trying to incorporate just straight up uncertainty associated with a narrowly defined type of soil, or was it because that soil actually has a wide range of properties itself, and that we're looking at, and that's what you're capturing?
Okay. This is a very good question, because I was asked a similar question in the past about how complex of your geological model represents in your groundwater model. In your stratigraphy model or groundwater model, you can have many different phases you want, and you can have a very detailed classification, based on different phases classifications. However, it comes down to the hydrological properties, like hydrogeology. Does that matter or not? And you are asking about how sensitive of those soil classifications represents in the groundwater model output.
Yeah,
yeah, I know. We did not do that.
Okay, but I'm just trying to get a sense. Yeah.
Yes, but I'm aware that if we consider, hey, CL, CH as a one class, SM, SP, right, as a one class because they are more coarse grains. Would that change the groundwater model or not? Some kind of sensitivity analysis, or maybe really go back to Liz ask about the uncertainty in your geological model. Yes, those should be further studied. I agree with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Liz or John, any follow-up questions or comments?
I had a follow-up comment. It gets back to this question Dave asked about the water levels during floods. And I think what Dave says makes a lot of sense, that you'd expect the water level to approach pretty much sea level even during a flood as it approaches the coast. But you certainly wouldn't expect that during a tropical storm, right? I mean, a tropical storm, you'd expect to have potentially several meters of storm surge, of storm tides. So if we could look back at yeah, there we go. So I think your data, well, maybe not, but I would think the data would show kind of that tropical storms are likely going to have a substantial impact as you go more towards the coast, because you're dealing with a higher elevation of the storm tide, and the opposite when you're dealing with a flood, a river flood. Do you see anything like that? So I wouldn't think that the two types of events are going to be the same. They're not going to have the same effect in terms of the water heights versus distance from the coast. Is there anything in your data that supports that? It seems like there is.
Yeah, you can see that if you're doing a storm in June, you can see that in the model you have more inundation areas. It is like 85%. So you can imagine that during this day, and more than 85% of a surface area covered by water. That created a downward force. This is different from the flood.
Right.
The flood over here, you only have maybe 65% area covered by water. And when you have a strong signals from the river, you will see the signal from the river into the aquifer and flow up. It is possible to the side, outside of a rain levee, outside of the river banks. So those are opposite impact over here. During the hurricane or during the storm over here, you will see lots of forcing actually come from the surface to push water down, because it's inundated by the hydrostatic water, from tile or from tile, something like that. So that flow direction is totally opposite. during the inundation or during nothing. No.
Of course, you also have the added complexity of the fact that the sand, the aquifer thickness is decreasing as you go south, right?
To south, yes, that's correct.
And so that should also be a factor, and that shows up in the model results.
Yes, when we do a, yeah, okay.
I have one discussion point quickly, and it's a point that John brought up. Franken mentioned that the driller's logs are actually useful because they provide sort of specific lithological information instead of having to infer something from an e-log or something. And then John, you said in your experience those could be pretty bad. I guess I'm just wondering where's the boundary between you're better off guessing or you're better off putting in questionable data. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that.
Okay, let me discuss this with you. Yes, John is absolutely right. Okay, some boring data, some geologs they are really poor. Okay, and they're not trustable, and they are a lot. I saw those in Texas. Okay, and then also in other states. So when I discuss these issues with USGS in the biology office, hey, I ask them, you are expert, right? Well, how did you identify good geologic log and bad geologic log? They told me that, I can share here with the group here. They told me that first look into a jeweler and drilling company. Are they have a high reputation or not? If those jewelers, the one they record, the jewelers and the jewel company there has a high reputation, I think you can trust what they write down in the registration form, and look into the description of lithological description. Like if they use sand, clay, shale, fine. If they start to use some weird drillers terms like I saw that gumbo. They use gumbo to represent. What is gumbo? It's a kind of mud and clay.
It's the Pleistocene.
They say, don't trust that. Probably you don't want to trust that. Something like that. Some kind of a rule of thumb when you pick up Geologic log for your modeling. So
they feel broadly though like there's a reasonable QCing of things that would be reasonable data to start with and things that you would be really suspect.
Right.
That's helpful. Yeah.
Right, but my point of view is that have some data better than no data. If the data can give me some betting information, right? That will be a good information to constrain your model, your structural, your geological structures.
Hey, if the gumball appears or disappears, right? That's a betting
right. There's some kind of information you might think about. Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But you are right. Yeah, there is no absolute boundary how to pick up the geologic log. It really depends on experience. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any last questions or comments from the panel? Awesome. Well, thank you again, Frank, for a great presentation, and to the panel for a really fruitful conversation. We have a few minutes for taking one or two audience questions. Might start with this one from Robert Lloyd. Does the post-hurricane groundwater exchange and liquefaction risk represent a newly recognized storm danger to communities?
Yeah, this is a good question about liquefaction. And I write these words into one of my slides here because we feel, and it was studied in the past, that when you have a sharp decrease water level inside the aquifers, your sharp change of water level inside the aquifer or inside the subsurface, that might create a momentary liquefaction. So that's the reason I bring up. And I feel that in the coastal areas, and when you have a hurricane or tropical storm, which is a very short period of time event, in and out, the water level up and down really fast. That will quickly impact the groundwater level in the aquifer, I mean the subsurface, and that I feel might potentially create the momentary liquefaction. That's the reason, yeah. But I did not see that. I don't know if someone studied that in the past.
Thanks. Maybe jump to this question from Dave Culper. Are there current or past CPRA projects along the river in Plaquemines Parish that have CPT-based soil behavior type classifications, such as Robinson's method?
We did not, for this project, okay, we did not collect the CPT data for the study. But I can tell you that we published the paper for the New Orleans area for the IHNC, where we collect CPT data and we look into the soil behavior types and Robinson method and also other methods as well. So we have that study in New Orleans area, not at this area. So I don't know, we did not, I believe because those MRD is very important, I believe there must have plenty CPT data along the MRD, and we just don't, when we say, my group don't collect the data, yeah. But I believe they have some there. And those, those CPT and behavior types really can correlate with the soil, the USGS soil classification. They can really correlate because we have a paper on that, and we really see that strong correlation. And it can really help in the future for the stratigraphy modeling, because CPT data basically is much cheaper and easier to get than drill a hole. That's my understanding.
This is Carol from CPRA. We've got the question recorded, and so I know it was specifically about CPRA projects, and I certainly don't know off the top of my head because I'm an ecologist and I work in planning. But we can listen to the question, and I can talk to who I need to talk to, and we will get back to you on an answer to that.
Thanks, Carol.
No problem.
I think we'll maybe do one last question, and thanks everyone for hanging on through this afternoon. So a question from Dennis Lambert. He said he asked this question in the first workshop at UNO: have we found any evidence that the channel of the river is subsiding, causing the hydraulic gradient to be reduced, flattened above the head of passes?
Last question for me, or?
That might be a question for anyone on the call.
Okay, great. Because I currently, I don't know.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, sorry. I think, I don't know, it's my tablet's working on both my phone audio and the tablet audio. So I don't know if Krista's still on the line and if she has an answer to this question. One of the things in the program that I manage, the Lowermost Mississippi River Management Program, that funds actually this Neotectonics panel, one of the things that we were interested in is looking at the subsidence of the Mississippi River channel. But we were going, the plan initially was to implement a deep rod subsidence network in the fast lands on either side of the Mississippi River. Although we're going to have a work plan to do that, we are not actually going to implement that monitoring network at this time. So that monitoring network, I think, had, if we had the data as a result of that monitoring network, would be able to answer the question. but I'll do the same thing with this question since we have it recorded. I'll see what sort of information that we have. Unless, Krista, do you have anything to add on either question?
Nope, Carol, that's exactly what I was going to mention was the work plan. So, yep.
Okay, good deal.
I'll just add that even the lowermost channel is still largely an alluvial channel, and if it is subsiding significantly, and there's plenty of sediment moving down the river for it to slightly change its form to accommodate those small subsidence changes. So it won't be easy to see a change associated with subsidence down there because the channel is adjusting its shape. But it's a good question. It's got me thinking. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all again for joining us this afternoon. Hope to see many of you again tomorrow afternoon when we hear from Dr. Julie Bernier, and also again on Friday morning when we hear from Dr. Simone Fiaschi. So look forward to reconvening then.
Thank you.
So just one thing, for any members of the panel or speakers or CPRA, I'll just announce if we're going to skip the closed door session today, considering we're already at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. I'm going to go to my next meeting. Bye-bye.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Diana,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Before